Presentation is made possible by the generous contributors to the Serious Joy Scholarship, permitting our graduates to launch into life and ministry without a burden of student loan debt.
All right. Well, thanks for being here. It was and is a privilege to be at this place. And it's been a privilege of mine to serve over the course of the years under a lot of great leaders and to be blessed by their leadership. I became a Christian in 2002. I was in and out of jail, drugs, alcohol, all kinds of just life falling apart. In God's providence, one Sunday, I happened to be in a church and hear the gospel. And I'd grown up in a nominal Christian home, so I'd heard the gospel, but hear the gospel in 2002 and hear it and believe it, and started to attend a church in Lexington, Kentucky, and sat under a guy who I still look back at, the senior pastor of that church, who is imperfect as all leaders are, but thankful that God put me in a place where I could hear the Bible every single Sunday. To hear him unpack it. And there's just a sense, and when I think back to that pastor, there's just a sense of gladness in my soul. So his leadership in terms of preaching just led to a happy heart. I was thrilled to be able to sit and listen. I didn't know it was called expository preaching. I didn't know what that term meant. But that's what he was doing week in and week out. He was unpacking the Bible. So I'm thankful to serve under a guy like that. His name was Bill Hennard. He's pastoring in Tennessee somewhere now. We still every now and then will text. And that was just something that I'm so thankful for, to be able to look back and at the places that God had me and the people that I had a chance to serve under, and just praise God for good leaders that served me so well. And what I want to talk about in this setting is talk to pastors as leaders, right? Not just preachers, but pastors as leaders. And there's a way that you can lead that leads to gladness, right? There's a way for you to lead that leads to the happiness of your people. And so I want to pray for God's help as we aim at that topic. Let's pray. Father, we're thankful again for gifts. Thankful for Dr. Naselli and what he just unpacked. I am encouraged by his life, and not only his academic rigor, that's well known, but it's also a privilege to know that he's faithful not just in the classroom but in his home. He's faithful with his wife and faithful with his kids. He's a good dad, and I'm thankful to have sat and listened to him, and I pray that you would help me to be more faithful in my own home with my own wife and children because of his example and for your glory. Right now, I pray for your help. I pray that, Father, you would help me to speak in such a way that would help us see that there's a way to lead your people purchased by the blood of your own Son. There's a way for us as pastors to lead them that leads to happiness, that leads to gladness. So, Father, help us to dive into that topic and then to walk away and go to our churches, go to our spheres of influence, and invest in the sheep that you have bought at the price of your own Son for the joy of their souls. In the fame of Christ's name, amen. So one of the things that pastors need to remember is that preaching and teaching is not the totality of pastoring, right? So hear that. Preaching and teaching is not the totality of shepherding God's people. So you can't show up on Sunday and having done all of your exegetical work, which you should do, you should prepare for that sermon, and you show up, you stand in the pulpit, and you unpack the Bible, right? And it's a joy, it's a blast to get up there and unpack the Bible, preach the Bible, look at what I've seen. That's what preaching is. You're trying to see things through the week, and you're praying the Spirit would help you savor what you've seen, and you cannot wait for Sunday to get there, so you stand in front of people and you tell them what you saw. That's what you're doing. And so that's something that's exciting, it's thrilling, you're ready for it, and you get there and you preach and you knock it out of the park and you get down and people are shaking your hand like, Pastor Brian, that was such a good sermon. I am so well fed. Nate, that was so good. And they pat you on the back and you walk away and you're encouraged and you think, I'm done until Sunday, right? I'm done for the week. I've led my church. I've preached a fantastic sermon. Preaching is primary. Preaching is massively important. So nothing that I say in this talk means to undermine the primacy of preaching. I think preaching is the primary way that you lead. Preaching and teaching the Bible. right? But it's not the totality of shepherding God's people. Pastors are supposed to be leaders in lots of different ways. There are staff meetings, right? You walk into a staff meeting, somebody should have an agenda. What are we going to talk about, or are we wasting time drinking coffee? Right? So there's staff meetings, there's practical ministry events, there's vision casting for the future. And if you're going to do that, you've got to take some time away and you've got to think about the future. You've got to think about where you're going. And there are a host of other ways that you have to lead as a pastor. So pastors are not merely preachers. Pastors are leaders, shepherds. And you do that in a whole host of ways. And one of the realities of being a leader, something Dr. Naselli alluded to a minute ago, is that you've been invested with a level of power. I know it's a kind of toxic word right now, but you have power as a pastor. There's a level of pastor or power that goes with pastoral ministry. You have a level of authority. Right? That's why in Hebrews 13, what does the writer tell the people to do? To do what with their leaders? Hebrews 13:17. Obey, right? Obey your leaders, right? There's a sense of authority that's invested in the office of a pastor. So one of the realities you got to get your head around, hopefully humbly, is that you've been invested with a level of power or authority. And how you use that power or authority in all these different ways that you're leading, how you use that power or authority is something you're going to have to give an account for, right? So that right there, that could make you tremble. I've been given this power and authority, and one day I'm going to stand before the King of the cosmos and answer for how I've wielded that power. That's why not many of you should become teachers, right? This is something you're going to have to stand before the King of the universe and give an account for. So you have a level of power, of authority, and so you should think real carefully about how you yield or wield that power. You should think real carefully about how you exercise your authority as a pastor. And specifically, in the next few minutes, I want you to think about this. There's a lot of things to think about there, but hone in, right? So pastors are leaders, and leaders have authority, and you have to use that authority in a lot of different settings. And as you use that authority, here's the fine point. I want you to think about how you use that power, exercise that authority, and aim at the gladness of God's people. So you as a pastor, as a shepherd, as a leader, are aiming, in one sense, not all you're aiming at, but in one sense, the gladness of God's people. Now, I wrestled last night. I was in the lobby of the hotel, like, man, nuance, right? Definitions. I'm going to say that pastors should aim at the happiness of their people, and people are going to say, wait a minute, don't be a people pleaser. Right, you're at Bethlehem. Trust me, we're not trying to be people pleasers. So I'm not going to spend an hour trying to nuance the word happiness and joy and gladness. I don't mean any sense of trivial or superficial happiness. I mean lead in such a way that even when you have to have hard conversations or make tough decisions, your people know this. They know this. They're loved, and they're continually pointed toward Christ, their exceeding joy. So even in hard conversations, even when you're having to make tough decisions, even when things are hard in your church and relationships are strained and people are at odds, they still walk away because you lead in such a way that they know He loves me, He cares for me, He's for me, not against me, and He continues to point me towards Jesus, who satisfies the deepest longings of my heart. So is that enough nuance for what I mean by gladness and happiness? Because I'm not going to keep going there. We got it? So don't walk away and think, Bethlehem guys, they said, just be people pleasers and you'll be a good pastor. I'll be like, that's wrong. And we'll have to write a couple of books or articles to fix it. So I've nuanced it. It's there. So in our age, there is this quickness to view power and authority with skepticism or outright disdain, right? It's not something people like right now. Pastors have power. Pastors are in these positions of authority. They're so abusive and oppressive, right? And so there's just this kind of skepticism, this almost knee-jerk reaction where I start talking about, hey, pastors, you have power. You have authority. And you're like, oh, you love that, don't you? You love that. That's what you guys want to talk about. So there's just kind of this knee-jerk kind of reaction against this discussion. But the reality is, if you're a pastor, you have been invested with power and authority. But we live in a culture that doesn't like it, and partly because power has been abused, and that's true. That's absolutely and sadly true. Skepticism is not completely unwarranted because power has gone bad in this world, and it started in a garden, right? God creates Adam and Eve. He creates them in His what? In His image, and they are called to do what with the world? Exercise dominion, right? Rule over it. That's power word. So they're called to exercise dominion, rule over this world. It's why I can go deer hunt with a clear conscience every year, right? I'm exercising dominion over the created world. So we've been given power from the very beginning. And how many chapters does it take for power to go awry? Chapter 3, there's a decision to take. That's power. That's exercising power. I'm going to take this thing, and they take what they should not take. And ever since then, suffering and sin and sorrow has marked our world. The world has been groaning, Romans 8:20. David Mathis says it this way: stories of use and abuse abound, and the letdowns make for big headlines. Prominent evangelicals fall, Twitter lights up. In the information age, we have more and quicker access than ever before to tales of bad leaders. I don't know that the quantity of bad leadership has increased, but we certainly know about it more readily today than ever. Right? So in our own lives, we all felt the sting of being let down by some leader in whom we've placed our trust. The pain and confusion are real. The wounds can be deep. And so we learn to guard ourselves from future disappointment. Cynicism can feel like a worthy shield. So that's Mathis, an article over at Desiring God. So what he's getting at is bad leadership exists. It's true. I'd say right now, if we paused and I said, hey, and I don't want to hear names, but if you just think about examples of bad leadership, it wouldn't take you very long for your mind to go there. Maybe yourself, and times you've led badly, and maybe other pastors that you've served under, or maybe bad leaders in the secular workplace. We know bad leaders exist. And one of the things that struck me last year, I wrote an article about this for Desiring God, and last year it struck me that we have been very busy of late. It feels that way anyway. Maybe my feeling's off. I didn't do a big investigation and track the data and everything else. It just felt to me that we were very busy lamenting leadership at every turn. Bad leadership exists, so that's all we talk about, and we lament it, and now power and authority is toxic. We're talking about it left and right. It's all over social media. And I did not see, and I still don't see it, a corresponding celebration of godly displays of power and authority. So over here, we're lamenting the fall of the leader. We want to do that. We want to jump into that conversation, but I didn't see the same kind of let's jump in to celebrate this good leader, this godly example of leadership. So I just stood back and said, man, okay, it's one thing to rightly lament, and we should, bad leaders. We should rightly lament failures of leadership. We should call that out. We should point that out. We should name that thing. That's bad, sinful, wicked leadership. At the same time, we should want to rejoice in the good. We should want to rejoice in the beautiful, right? We should want to say, hey, look at this good leadership. Look at this example of a man who's godly and loves his wife and loves his kids and loves his church and is being faithful. So yes, let's lament the bad leadership, but let's also celebrate the God-given good leaders that we have. If we want to cultivate healthy families and churches and communities, we need more than negative reactions to bad leadership. We need more than that. It's not enough. We need a positive vision and good examples. And thankfully, the Bible provides. There are examples in the Bible of bad leaders. There are also examples in the Bible of men who lead well, good leaders. And one of the examples that just struck me, reading the Bible, sitting over the church, and I was reading my Bible, and a friend sitting next to me, and I said, look, here's this guy's leading, and it says his people are happy. I So that seems significant. So let's think about Solomon for just a moment. This interaction with the Queen of Sheba in 1 Kings. So it's amazing. Queen of Sheba, she's heard of the fame of Solomon concerning the name of the Lord, 1 Kings 10:1. And so what does she want to do? She wants to go see for herself whether these reports about Solomon are true. She gets there, she's posing these hard questions to Solomon, and his answers just kind of blow her away. The wisdom, right? This guy's wise, he's sharp, he's on it. And then listen to what she says in 1 Kings chapter 10, verses 6 to 7. The report was true that I heard in my own land of your words and of your wisdom, but I did not believe the reports until I came and saw with my own eyes. And behold, the half was not told to me. Your wisdom and prosperity surpassed the report that I heard. So I've heard about you, had to come see for myself. She shows up, she's asking questions, she's putting him on the spot, he's on the hot seat, Queen of Sheba, and he's knocking him out of the park. Here it is, and she's like, wow. They didn't tell me, you're better than what they said. This is amazing to see. And then this verse, verse 8, just struck me. Happy are your men. Happy are your servants who continually stand before you and hear your wisdom. So she not only celebrates his wisdom and his answering and fielding of her questions, she extols the happiness of his people. Solomon, you're leading, exercising wisdom. You're brilliant. And she doesn't say your people are impressed with you. She doesn't say that. She says your people are happy. She doesn't say they're getting in big long lines as you get done speaking to come off your chair and to walk out towards the back. I'll be at the back, shake your hand. She's not saying back there in the back of the room and people are walking out and man, they just want to pat you on the back. They're so impressed with you. They're blown away at how smart you are. She doesn't say that. She says your people are happy. And so last year I'm reading this, I'm sitting there and I'm seeing, I can't remember what season it was or what was going on. There's some controversy all the time, right? But there's this moment where I just felt like, man, all we're doing is just leaders are failing and leaders are falling and we're jumping all over that. We just everybody wants to get in that discussion. And I'm like, man, are there leaders out there that are faithful? Surely there are. And can we talk about that? Can we paint that vision? And then, in God's providence, I'm reading it, and here it is. Here's an example, one in the Bible, of a man who's leading and exercising wisdom. And it's not about being impressed with his wisdom. It's about his people being happy. Happy are your people. Happy are your servants. Happy are your men. And then I just started to read my Bible more and find that this kind of flourishing wasn't limited to Solomon's kingdom. 2 Samuel 23, 3-4. When one rules justly over men, ruling in the fear of God, he dawns on them like the morning light. You walk into church Sunday, and would your people say that? You walk into your church, and people say, there's the pastor, or one of our pastors. And he dawns on us like morning light, like the sun brings warmth and life. He dawns on them like morning light, like the sun shining forth on a cloudless morning, like a rain that makes grass to sprout from the earth. Gladness is our aim. It's why Paul labored and toiled. 2 Corinthians 1:24. Not that we lord it over your faith, but we work what? We work with you, finish it, for your joy. Or we're fellow workers for your joy. It's a plug for a book. It's in the bookstore. David Mathis wrote it, Workers for Your Joy. Solomon, happier people. 2 Samuel, when you rule justly, you dawn on people like the morning light, like the sun on a cloudless morning, like rain that makes grass sprout. Paul, we work with you for your joy, for your gladness. So just thought, I don't think that I ever, 17 years or so as a pastor, and I never made this like a check, like, hey, sit down and evaluate my ministry. Are my people glad? Are the people that serve under me in whatever ministry area that I was assigned to, the various churches I've been at, are my people glad? And again, go back to the beginning nuance. I'm not talking about glib, trivial, never mad at me. I'm talking about deep-seated gladness in God. Are they glad? Not that they're never upset with you, but even in those moments when you've had to say the hard thing or make the hard call, they are happy that you love them, that you work hard on their behalf, and that you keep pointing them to Jesus, their exceeding joy. Are they glad? What would that look like in your evaluation, end of the year evaluation, when you do pastoral evaluations? You're asking the people around you, are you glad? Are you glad in God? Does my ministry dawn on you like the morning sun? Or do you feel beaten down? Is there a sense of, oh, the pastor's here? One guy said, good leaders walk into the room and they diffuse the tension. They diffuse it. Bad leaders walk in and everybody clams up. Not glad he's in the room. It's tight. Watch your mouth. Don't say the wrong thing. Don't admit that mistake. You didn't do that thing you're supposed to do. Or you walk in and it's just diffused. Like, Pastor, I blew it. There's grace. It's accountability. There's not at odds. So are you people glad? So, over the last few years, I think we've been lamenting leadership pervasively. But I don't want us, in the midst of bad examples, to forget the value of good leadership, of good exercises of power and authority. Authority and power are good things. Good things. You're created in the image of God to reflect Him, right? To reflect who He is. So John Piper would say there's 7 billion mirrors on the planet, all meant to point to Him. So power and authority, He has those. No one can stay His hand, Job 42:2, right? He does whatever He pleases. He is omniscient and omnipotent. So power and authority, good things. You're created in His image. You're supposed to exercise dominion. You're supposed to rule, vice regents. Those are good things. When we rule rightly, exercise dominion appropriately, as pastors particularly, we can lead down a pathway to joy. So, okay, I think everybody in the room is like, yep, okay, agree, preaching to the choir. So I said earlier, though, I think we need a picture of good, godly leaders. Leadership that would aim at the gladness of God's people. So what does that leader look like? So I'm going to give you some characteristics, and I have 6 of them real quickly. Number 1, this type of leader, these men are humble men. Leaders who make people glad don't think too highly or too often of themselves. I've heard it said that humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking about yourself less. You get that? You don't have to beat yourself up and have this pseudo-humility and denigrate yourself. It's simply thinking about yourself less. You're not all caught up with you and who you are and how you look, right? You don't think too highly or too often of yourself. You're an others-oriented man. Philippians chapter 2, verses 2 through 3. Right? You're an others-oriented man. Good leaders realize that God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. James 4:6. Right? You want to be a good leader? Don't fight with God. You want to fight with God? Be proud. You'll lose. You'll lose that fight. It's not a fight you can win. Don't be in opposition to the king of the cosmos. That's stupid, right? You don't want to go there. So humble men receive the grace of God. Proud men, the opposition. Doesn't mean leaders are timid or unsure of themselves. It means that they're aware of their weaknesses. 2 Corinthians 12:9 means they depend on Jesus. I can do nothing apart from you. And they consistently lean towards others. Another thing about humble men is humble leaders link arms with those around them. They know they need to be part of a team. David Mathis writes this: the kind of pastors we long for in this age are good men with good friends. Friends who love them enough to challenge their instincts, tell them when they're mistaken, hold them to the fire of accountability, and make life both harder and better, both more uncomfortable and more fruitful. So you have that leader, that friend in your life? It's like, I have friends like that in my life because I know they're going to ask me hard questions about what are you looking at on the internet? How's your family life? How are you treating your wife? All those things. Some of them are in this room. So there's a sense in which life gets harder because I have to answer to somebody, right? It's a little bit uncomfortable to answer some of those questions. But it's good for me. It's good for my soul. And I hope that type of influence exerted on me is good for those around me. So humble leaders know how to listen, integrate others' wisdom, check for the blind spots as they attempt to wisely navigate complex situations. They are not the type of people who act as lone rangers from a foolish sense of self-sufficiency. So be humble men. Number 2, servant-minded men. So you want to be the type of leader who dawns on your people like the sun, be humble and be a servant. King of the universe, what's he say? What verse do you think I want to quote? I came. There you go. You can say it louder. I came not to be served, but to serve by giving my life as a ransom for many. Matthew 20:28. So the king of the kingdom is a servant king. He says in Mark 10, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be the slave of all. So now this kind of service does not abdicate its call to lead to appease people. You got the grumbler, right? Like, well, you're a servant, and I need this done, and this done, and this done, and then the grumblers start to set the agenda for your ministries. That's not the picture. Of just servant doesn't mean beck and call. I'm at your beck and call. Doesn't mean that. Doesn't mean that at all. We don't abdicate the call to lead under this guise of servanthood. But it does employ authority for the genuine good of others. I want to use my pastoral authority, this power that I have, for your good. Not for my fame, not for my recognition. I want to use the power and authority that God has given me for you, for your good, that you'd be happy in God, you'd be well fed, you'd be well supplied, you'd be built up. That's what I want to do. So your pastor, you are a others-oriented, humble servant of all. I think of John Calvin, which most of you didn't just think of John Calvin. My oldest son's name's Calvin. I enjoy reading John Calvin, and he was a pastor. He did not sit in the ivory towers and just write theological treatise and didn't want anything to do with people. He's writing the institutes for students entering into the ministry. That's eventually what it becomes. He writes his commentaries to serve pastors. He preaches sermons to serve people. And he tells him and this is not in here, so I don't want to go over. But he tells him and Beza, Theodore Beza, his protege, they start the academy, and they're investing in these pastors, and they tell them that undertake your studies for the good of the church. Beza's like, hey, this isn't games. This isn't for mere entertainment. You don't come to study Wayne Grudem just so you'll have some fun. It's fun, but that's not the aim. The aim is that you'd learn and you'd grow in your knowledge of God and His Word and the world, and you'd serve others. That's a model for us. We're serving others. So be humble men. Be servant-minded men. Number 3, be courageous men. Joe Rigney has a book coming out with Crossway this year, I think. I can't remember when it comes out. I don't know if they have copies here or not. Come out in the summer. And it's on courage, and it's fantastic. I encourage you to buy the book on courage by Joe when it comes out. Courage should mark pastors. And boy, are we in a moment where we're going to need some courage. God calls Joshua to lead his people in the promised land. He tells him 3 times in 4 verses to do what? Be strong and courageous. So you can say that strongly. Be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. I heard you. Be strong and courageous. You just imagine God thundering. Joshua, go into the land. Be strong. Be courageous. Be strong. Be courageous. We need pastors who are ready for the fight. You're ready to lead God's people. And it's not leading them through Disneyland. It's not leading them through ease. But through a world that is filled with confusion. We can't define what a woman is. We don't know how many genders there are. This world is filled with confusion, and we do not live in a positive world. So there's this article called, article talk that kind of looks at the culture and talks about how we used to live in a positive world, neutral world, negative world. Aaron Renn, you can look it up, A-R-R-E-N-N. So positive world, neutral world, negative world. Like Christians, you used to live in this kind of positive world where Christianity, there was some cash value to being a follower of Jesus, right? There was some, particularly in politics, right? That was something that was a base there. And then we kind of moved into this kind of neutral world where it's kind of neither bad or good. But today, you don't live in a positive or neutral. You live in a negative world. Oh, you're a Christian. So it's not the same cash value, right? So this is the culture we live in. It's going to become increasingly hard, and so we need pastors with spines. We need men who will stand firm, who will not waver. When people come calling and say, hey, pastor, you have a fantastic building here, but one of the things we noticed about your building that seems to be open to the public is there are not bathrooms for men and women and LGBTQ whatever. So we're going to need you to accommodate, using this public space, accommodate the community. And what will you say in that moment? Will you say, I can't do that because I'm not a liar. There are men and there are women, and that's all there is. Will you stand firm when pressure is exerted? We need men who are courageous. It doesn't mean that you're never fearful. It doesn't mean you're never fearful. You can be scared to death and then still do the right thing. I served 2005. I was in Iraq with the Army, and we were out on a mission, and we ambush. We're getting hit. And we're trying to get a convoy through an area of operation, AO, and fire's coming. And in that moment, you think, this is my moment, right? I've played this as a kid 1,000 times. I've played war in my backyard and in the woods. I'm ready for this. And I'm sitting there, and I'm a gunner, right? So a gunner's sitting on top of the Humvee, and you're supposed to return fire. And you know what I'm doing? I don't want to get up. I'm like, there are literally, I've got pictures, bullets pinging off of our Humvee, and I'm thinking, I'm not sticking my head up there. So I reach up, I grab my 50 cal, I push that butterfly button, it starts rocking. But I don't know where I'm shooting, right? So eventually I creep up and take the wheel. But it took a minute. I'm sitting there like, this is not like it was in my backyard, right? But eventually I did the right thing. We need leaders. You may be scared to death. You don't know what's coming, but you do the right thing. I was standing in a park a couple years ago down south of the cities. Big dog. My kids were there playing. Guy had this massive dog. I can't remember what it was called, a mastiff or something like that. And they start to walk up to it, and it just starts to go at them. Right? And so I get between, just in a minute, I'm getting between my boys and that dog. Do you think I was scared? Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was like, this is it. This is it. I am absolutely terrified right now, but that dog will not get to my kids. Right? Courage. My people are threatened. I don't know what's going to happen to me, to my job, to my family, but I'm going to do the right thing. We need leaders who are courageous. Number 4, we need sober-minded men. So humble servants, courageous, sober-minded men. So this is another Rigneyism. He describes sober-mindedness as clarity of mind. I'm going to give you 3 things here if you want to write it down. This is so helpful. Sober-minded men, clarity of mind. So what does sober-minded mean? Clarity of mind, steadiness of soul, and readiness to act. So it intersects a little bit with that last point, right? That readiness to act is that you're going to lead. You're going to do the right thing. But it adds this clarity of mind and steadiness of soul. You see the issues clearly, which means, Pastor, you should be thoughtful. You should have time in your schedule to sit around and just think. I need to think about this cultural issue. I need to think about this biblical issue. I need to think about what's coming down the road. So clarity of mind, steadiness of soul. And here's the picture that comes to mind. Picture a guy on a stage. He's sitting in his seat, and there's an intense debate going on. He's been challenged, some of his views, by a theological hero. Challenges are coming nonstop from him, and then maybe put another guy in there. It's just an intense debate back and forth. And the other guy, he's sitting there, he's taking this criticism, this challenge to his views, and he doesn't lean forward. Doesn't lean forward. He's not leaning in like, oh, I got to respond. He's just sitting there, lean back, same posture, calm, listening, taking it all in. And he gets his chance, responds kindly, graciously, thoughtfully. He sees the issues clearly, and his soul is steady. He doesn't need to lean forward. He knows whose he is. He knows who he is. He's unmoved. Doesn't mean he's not listening. Doesn't mean he's not considering. It just means you can't faze him because he's sober-minded. He's thoughtful. He's thought through these things. He knows who's bought him. He knows he's loved. He knows his greatest problem has been solved. And when it's his turn, he's ready. He'll speak. We need sober-minded men. He's not afraid to have his ideas or decisions challenged. He's ready to act when it's time to act. Number 5, we need faithful men. One of the greatest needs in the world today, I think, are people who are simply faithful. Not trying to make a name for themselves, lead the next revolution. They simply want to come to the end and hear this: well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter the joy of your master. That's all you want to hear. That's what you want to hear at the end. How great was your church? How big it was. Wow, great sermons. No. Well done. You're faithful. You're faithful. And be faithful, men, at home, in your neighborhood, in your own town, in your own church. So many guys trying to be faithful right now by fighting culture war and fighting people 1,000 miles away on Twitter that they don't know, will never meet. I'm faithful. I'm on Twitter every day, challenging every bad idea I see. I'm like, man, just live in your town and get to know your neighbors and shut up. There's a place for that. There's a place for social media. There's a place for engagement. So I'm not throwing the whole thing out with the baby with the bathwater. But there are some people. It's like, that's all you do. I don't know how in the world you write a sermon or pastor your people. How you know your sheep if all you're doing is engaging social media, I'll never know. So be faithful. And be found faithful in your neighborhood, in your town. A friend of my church, he likes to say that you should have a high say-do ratio. You say you're going to do something, you do it. Be that kind of guy. Number 6, and lastly, truly good leaders are marked by joy. Of course, you're going to hear joy at Bethlehem. I don't mean these leaders are always chipper, superficially happy. So again, they know how to weep when people weep. and ought to make tough decisions. When they make these tough decisions, they're also able to laugh and smile when the world seems to be falling apart. First in, last out, laughing loudest. And they can do this because they know something. You can be joyful in the deepest, darkest pain because you know something. What do you know? God is for me and not against me. That there's laid up for me a crown. That He will never leave me nor forsake me. In this world that's gone awry, you can know that. And no matter what's going on, you can be joyful. Good leaders know the world's broken, but they have a joy in Jesus that is deep and immovable. They can be in prison and they can sing. David Mathis, one more time. Churches know this deep down, that happy pastors, not groaning elders, make for happy churches and a glorified Savior. Pastors who enjoy the work and work with joy are a benefit, an advantage to their people. So pastors, you are leaders. You've been given authority. You can use that authority, you can use that power to be oppressive. You could use that power to be a jerk. Or you could use that power and authority for the good of others and the glory of God. My prayer is that you would lead in such a way that your people would say, He dawns on us like the morning sun. I pray that you would lead in such a way that other people would come around and see and spend time with you and say, happy are your people. Let me pray. Father, grateful for this opportunity, I do pray that you would help us to lead in ways that would honor you, that would care for your bride, the church, and would lead to their joy and your glory. Amen.
Bethlehem College and Seminary is still accepting applications for the coming academic year. For more information, visit bcsmn.edu.